Molo. Kuhle unjani? Uyiphathe Cela uprof.
CEO.
Cela uprof. Provincial Chair SALGA, Mr. Sithole Mbanga, Councillor Lerato Maluka, Councillor Babalwa Lobishe, Ms. Nokwanda Tungata, izani ngaphambili bahlonipheki. Uphi Okay. Uphi uphi lo mntu? Lukhona mngani. Oh, yes. Uprofessor lukhona ndisakuzamela. Provincial Chair Mamu Zonge, where is your Provincial Chair? Mamu Gaga, where is your Provincial Chair? Nomhle Gaga, where is your Provincial Chair? Uthini mamphosela? Unganisesigcawini. Umuntu ongekhoyo kuthiwa akekho uCouncillor Lobishe. Chair, take your seat. Baphelele. Prof usaye bathroom. It's coming back just now. Lukhona ke, I'll hand over to you.
Graveyard shift lo, but might as well start. Bantu bahluthi ngoku, at least bengekho mngqusho kodwa. Akekho. Is not in attendance okanye uyaphuma ku-program? Okay. Ndicela ukuthatha elithuba lokubana ndibulise bonke abantu abalapha. Ndiyayiqonda ukuba izisu zisenzimanyana okwangoku, kodwa ke loo nto bekufanele bithi ziyozelisa kunoba ziyathethisa. So ke it's possible uba njengoba besisitya thina abanye bebebhizinesi ama-bodies badla amasaladi kuphela, so ezabo zikhaphukhaphu. Kodwa ke ndawucela siphathisane in terms of this important panel discussion, which is to try and bring yonke into ebithethwa apha together. Uba ke program director bendikulaa cawe yasekhaya, bendizoqala ngokubulisa umfundisi ndithi in absentia, ndiphinde ndiye ku-premier ndithi in absentia, ndingaphantse ndingagqibi ndiko-absentia, kodwa ke mandibulise usihlalo weSALGA apha ephondweni bese ndithi faku all protocol observed. At least in that manner, I know that ndikhahlelile. Ndinayo wena into uba bekusecaweni. nonobhayibhile obebavakashele ngezolo. But it's really good to be here. And ndicela abantu abapha kwi-eating area tana i-noise levels zithanda ukuba sezantsi so that we can hear each other kweli cala. I've taken a lot of notes in the process of this morning and listening quite attentively. I must say, Chairperson, that I have attended a number of these kinds of gatherings, the SALGA, across different provinces and nationally. One of the things I've picked up this morning, there seems to be a positive growing urgency about the state of local government and an urgency about the need to address the state of local government because it's becoming a growing frustration for a lot of people, particularly even ourselves as residents. Nalapha I'm sure bandigenza a survey. Ndithi mabaphakamise izandla abantu abonwabileyo in their capacity as residents where they reside. I might not get 50% plus one. And therefore, it's no longer a problem of poor people or ordinary people who are frustrated about services not arriving. You have a serious problem of people who are rate payers, who are not getting value for money for the rates that they are paying for. But I think the analogy ebisenziwa ngupresident yemilenze nomzimba is very important because something has happened in our imagination of governance in this country. Is that we've stopped having debates about the architecture of the spheres of government. There used to be a time that this was a serious debate, and in particular amongst the governing party, when there was still a debate about provinces, as to whether do we need less provinces, do we need to think of doing away with provinces, because that debate was necessary so that you may be able to have enough resources and personnel to capacitate local government. Because if you keep your provinces as vast as they are, you then are not able to redeploy certain personnel and resources and budgets and all of that. Now, Kenya is an interesting case study, and I know some people here may have visited Kenya because Kenya, after adoption of the new constitution in 2011, went through a process of devolution. So they've actually devolved not only just functions, but also budgets and decision-making powers, right down to the local sphere, because that's the sphere that is closest to people. And the Premier was quite correct to re-emphasize this issue of cooperative governance. Ayikho into ebuhlungu utufonela umntu athi hayi landlela imbi akuyo yethu yeyasebhisho. Ndithi ngoku ndawufikelwa ngubani mna ebhisho because ndihleli nawe mna apha emakhaya andiyazi nendlela yebhisho ubihamba phi. Then we need to try and deal with those. So I think we're going to have indeed a grand debate. I'm going to try and keep our time to the 2 hours that we've been afforded. Don't worry, izinxibo zenu aniziphathanga mahala. I will release you in good time. Ndiyababona mama umphoselwa ke into nezinxibo bayayithanda ke bona. Ngoba ndandinabo napha ePort Alfred besenza also Fire Town. So ewe ndizaba ijudge namhlanje, don't worry. Uba sesiphe sona sinxibe kufuneka siphume phambili. But without further ado, before we start the panel discussion, let me ask the MEC for Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs in the Eastern Cape, Mr. Zolile Williams, to make a short presentation which will prove as a provocation for the panel, and then the debate will start.
Tafile yako buti igcwele kakhulu. ayimfutshananga le ndoda ayilingani nolukhona. Thank you very much, Program Director. I hope I will be brief enough to present in short what I was mandated to present in order to trigger discussions. Greetings to everyone present, all protocol observed. I do not have the luxury of time. Unfortunately, I'm double packed because I've got parliamentary questions I have to respond to in the legislature. And I'm also here, so it's kind of a catch-22. I think as we gather here, we are all aware that we are meeting on completely different contexts in terms of the national government. And this political environment, or the result of that political environment, has been largely blamed on local government. That's why where we are, because local government has not delivered what local government must deliver to the communities of this country. So we must know, all of us in the sphere, that were blamed for the result that we have in terms of the government of national unity. But the background to local government, in short, from its inception during the CODESA negotiations, local government was forgotten. CODESA discussed everything critical about the vision for South Africa, but we forgot local government. And it was on hushed tones that we had to throw our eyes into the local government sphere and what is it that we want to see happening in that sphere. And as a result of that, there was a quick introduction of the Local Government Transitional Act. And from that Local Government Transitional Act, the intention was to restructure municipalities because they were divided into former Bantu affairs and former white municipalities. So as a forgotten sphere, we had to create the Local Government Transition Act to integrate the two. And all those that are following local government or that have researched local government would know that we call that phase the pre-interim phase. It was both the statutory and non-statutory. Us, as black people, we were non-statutory. Whites were statutory, integrated to form one local government. And the second phase came with the interim phase when we voted in 1995 for one municipality in our jurisdictions. These municipalities had to be democratically managed, but the policy dispensation was still through the various apartheid laws. Those who were in local government at that time would know that we used what we called the Ordinance 20 of 1974 to run the municipality. Was democratic, but the system internally was still run according to the apartheid framework. The democratic parliament, in hushed tones too, after 1995, 1998, they came with the white paper on local government. And this white paper was to actually be a blueprint of local government transformation in South Africa. But the challenge of the white paper was that it was full of assumptions. And those assumptions are realities that we are dealing with today as these municipalities. The president, as we're noting, has recorded here that one of the assumptions was that local government would be able to collect revenue, 90% of revenue, and 10% will be through other funding from provincial and national spheres of government. Which debate has proven to actually present what we have in local government today. The 1.5 trillion local government deficit is as a result of those assumptions. Secondly, the two-tier system between districts and locals. Another assumption was that districts must be able to support their locals. But the policies that were introduced is that the regional services, the regional council levies, whilst districts must support locals, but the policy is taking away what they must use to support. And there was an intention to patch back that budget shortfall because of the taking away of that. But when Treasury tried to patch it back, it was as limited as possible. And now districts are there with a function of support, but they can't support. Intergovernmental relations and municipal capacity. It is expected that all municipalities must be able to relate with other spheres of government on an equal footing, but the capacity of municipalities is actually lacking because of inherent binding constraints they have as it relates to funding and all the other constraints that we have raised. There was intention that there must be economies of scale because districts, because they are regional governments, must be able to ensure that development happens systematically to cover every corner of that district. But these assumptions were actually not true, as we can see today. Poor execution of policy directives and legislation. One size fits all of us know municipalities. If Tshwane Metro has to comply, Nquba Themba municipality must also comply with the same standards as Tshwane. When Tshwane is a big entity competing with the provincial government, but those compliances have to be found in Nquba Themba equally. Global pressures of urbanization, economic decline, climate change, and technological advancements. As Katali Noba Usenguza, technological advancements must mean the same thing to you at Nguza and those that are in Buffalo City and Cape Town. The systematic hollowing out of capacity and capability at local government level. Policies. There's a lump of policies that province and national government are doing to local government, but these policies actually hollow out skills. One of them is in relation to regulation of remuneration of employees. Once we started with regulation, skills emigrated out of local government. Even now, we are still dealing with the same problem. And engineers are actually prefer to be out of local government than in local government. They are prepared to be consulting engineers in private sector than in municipalities because we can't afford them because of this hollowing out of skills. Over-regulation. The local state is expected to enforce its own laws, the bylaws. But the local state does not have fiscal capacity to do so. And what is the end result? Unregistered businesses, poisoned food sold because the local state cannot enforce. In Ngubayatemba, if you can have police there to help you with your bylaw enforcement, you won't be able to pay salaries next month. Now, whilst it's a state that must have capacity to enforce, but it can't enforce that capacity. Local government is a site of confluence of complex societal contradictions. We must conceptualize that the location of local government within communities makes this level of government very vulnerable because poverty, unemployment, and inequality are not theoretical. They are actually there. Get out of this hotel now, get to the street, you will see poverty and inequality. Ayonto esiyicingayo in local government. Do we have a cadre of leadership, both politically and administratively, that has clarity of thought in respect of these realities? What is the operational conduct of this leadership in responding to these challenges? The cadre of leadership required in local government must appreciate the challenges confronting us and must be preoccupied with ensuring basic services are delivered and that local economic development initiatives are able to create opportunities to empower local communities, to participate in economic activities, and also crowd in investment in our municipalities. Colleagues, local economic development, we must not complicate it. Deputy Minister Kapa talked about it. Livestock improvement program plays a big role in rural communities to make sure their livestock can be marketable, can grow faster, can have all the important. That's what local government could do. There was a program where TEBA integrated with local government because of our relation with mines and mine workers to work in this province to try and ensure that we grow the agricultural sector because it's our niche as a province. Now, if municipalities do not see that, it's a matter that we need to engage on. Let me go to quickly the business of local government. What are we here for? We reference local government from how it was conceptualized in the 1998 white paper as developmental local government working together with communities to ensure that their lives are sustained. And being developmental implies that the services we deliver must be efficiently and effectively delivered. And in that delivery of services, there's expectation that good governance is the currency that must be able to drive that development and delivery takes place within a legally compliant environment, not as a constraint, but as an enabler for delivery to happen. Municipalities, as sites of implementation of government priorities, especially as it relates to basic services, must therefore be empowered with simple, clear, standard operating procedures on how to pragmatically implement such deliverables. Look, colleagues, in brief, in 1990, when the ANC was trying to create the nature of public service in South Africa, they came with the concept of the new public service. And in them, it was a move away from this bureaucratic system that was brought about by the apartheid system. Desk-oriented, rigid, compliance-based. So when the ANC came, it came with the new public management. But this thing could not be born. This idea refused to be born. Because as it was born, we were to deliver at the same time. And our view at that time was that we need a progressive revocracy that will transform society because we're coming from apartheid. And therefore, we must allow innovation in our system of management. But when we started with innovation, in fact, it is that open public service approach that actually created opportunities for fraud and corruption. And we had to recover from it and go back to the rigidity of Max Weber. Because Max Weber is clear on institutional rules of the game. As a like is fundiswa or prof. Uba institutional theory, Max Weber says, we must just be compliant and go according to the rules of the game. That's why we are going back to this compliance-based system. But it was not conceived like that in the 1990s by the African National Congress. Now, as practitioners of local government, there was a book called An Ordinance which guided you as to how you should do whatever it is when you are in those offices. We removed that, and there is nothing to replace it. Was it all wrong? If it was not all wrong, how do we reintroduce it? In the Eastern Cape, we are currently busy with a provincial standard operation procedures that will tell each manager as to what to do when. And it's not done by consultants, it's done by us. We're writing it ourselves using practitioners' knowledge so that we're able to transform, using our experience in local government, to transform the local state. A local state is expected to enforce its bylaws, but when it is dependent on other spheres to enforce its own, then those bylaws are deemed to fail dismally. Can't do it. Depending on the police say, which it's not in the Criminal Procedure Act, it's not here, you can't enforce it. So you're deemed to fail. These and other binding constraints amputate local government's ability to focus on its business. Whilst the district development model presented a single window of intergovernmental coordination, there are still challenges of seamless implementation, which then defeats the intentions of our federalized unitary system of governance. The success of implementing our policies is predicated on the success of implementing the Intergovernmental Relations Act as it enunciates the district development model to ensure that there's a single window of coordination. So, if business yethu is to ensure that operations and maintenance, we normally couch this in this collective term called service delivery. Let's unbundle it. Intoni engapha ko service delivery. It's operations and maintenance of infrastructure to serve your communities. It's ensuring that we manage refuse to prevent dirty towns and cities. It's to ensure that we manage town planning. Upumeya waseNgcobo. eNgcobo, there was a building that collapsed and almost killed people. Iyeza pha eMbashe, iyeza eSenqu. Umeya waseSenqu uphi izaba pha eSenqu lando. Why? Because municipalities' role is to ensure that town planning and zoning is done through the law. But now, kukwavula sibhuqe. But lo vula sibhuqe is encouraged by the structure, is structural. Awunama polisa or enforcer your bylaw on zoning applications. Who's gonna do it? The police are busy with extortionists and all that. So this creates problems of how do we then implement and enforce what we want to enforce. So the business of local government becomes compromised because of these binding constraints. Professionalization. Since 29 years of local government, we've been besieged somewhat with incompetent people getting into our space. If the primary objective of senior officials in municipalities is to fulfill party political interests, therefore our system has been flooded by wrong individuals. Anendiv. Ndifuna lena ithethwe ndim ndikwipati. Funeka ithethwe ndim nive kakuhle prof. Ndingu-treasurer wepati. But ndifuna uzixelela ii-officials ezinqwakuzayo uba mazifumane kum. Uba if their primary objective is to fulfill party interests as a primary objective, then you are a wrong individual. Because what guides you is the law. Now, once you do something else, then you are in trouble. The system must protect professionals from interference. Let me tell politicians also. You chose to be a politician. Stop your interest of being an official. Dianecela. If you have to professionalize local government, play your officials' role, allow your political role, allow officials to be officials. Suba chincha, because bayaxaka once ba participate kule political environment yakho, baku contradict conference in ufuna uzobagxotha ngoku kanti bebefakwe nguwe. Let's avoid that. It is critical that bureaucrats are loyal to the developmental objectives of the country. And this can only be confirmed by how they manage the business of local government as outlined in the previous input. Because if a municipal manager cares less that there's a pothole in the road or there's refuse uncollected, which refuse is now creating localized disasters. So if our concerned ngezinto, appointment in municipalities must be about qualified and experienced individuals capable to do their job, not political alignment. Let me tell you shortly. Lendo ye political patronage and appointment of people without skills. Yeza nekaba. Yeza nomuntu ongafundanga actually. Completely. But lomfo, wayengumfo fana lamakhwenkwe sasikhula nawo anepotomane ezinkulu or stronger in character. Wathathwa lomfo wancikiswa uniform ngamangesi. Kwathwa makakhokhela imfazwe wasebenzisa ubukroti. Wayiwina nguGeneral Garfield. You must read about him. General Garfield. Then he introduced into a patronage where he dismissed all government officials, close to 50,000. Wathi makuqashwe bonke ababantu bangafundanga bebewina imfazwe. Sanuzenza nifundile into zabantu abangafundanga. Nifunani kwinto zika General Garfield? Human capacity. On human capacity, our cadreship in councils has lowered in terms of capacity. And as is it deployed, because the lowering of capacity reflects on the decisions that are being taken by your council. In certain instances, councils do not trust correct advice and will be manipulated to wrongdoing by officials. In a developmental state context, politicians rein in officials. Isana lubeleki mnina njengo premier sitho. Although Prof, this developmental state theory that we're declaring, it's unheard of. You don't declare developmental state, but you actually work towards it quietly. And ibonele declare developmental state, ucinga uba opponents the developmental state will stand aloof and watch you building constraints for them. Ay, mandiek. Politicians. Now, in a developmental context, okay, this inverted logic, because lendo yoku laulazi officials, in a basis, let me tell you what's the basis. This inverted logic is only possible in corrupt self-serving environments. That's where officials will lead. Politicians must have political capacity and must tremble at the sight of injustice against their communities. Injustice, bobabumdaka, neza potholes, and everything that is wrong. You must tremble as a politician. Thank you very much.
Thank you, MEC. Can I please ask that we move this? Is it possible? Yeah, take it off stage, please. I'm worried that people on this side of the room will not be able to see the panelists. Thank you so much. Thank you for those opening remarks, MEC. I'm going to take this opportunity now to introduce our panel before we kick off. Igama lamna ngulukhona wakwamnguni kula lali yase Flagstaff. Sekunento kuthiwa iFlagstaff akuthiwa idolophu ngo district mayor kuthiwa ilalali yase Flagstaff. Ndathi ndizintroducer komnye umuntu izolo apha xa ndifika wathi oh ngwalalali kanti ndithi idolophu noba istrato sinye nehalf mos sinye nehalf iback street ihalf yestrato. And then I'm going to start on my far left, ndiqale ngo-Professor Somadoda Fikeni. So ayeke ukuba yi-academic ngoku. Wabona uba ufuna ukuyofaka isicwebhu phaa kwa abakakugqibi Prof. He's the National Chairperson for the Public Service Commission. Let's welcome him. Kufuphi naye ngu-CEO SALGA, not an unfamiliar face to you all. Masimamkele naye Mr. Stole Mbanga. Then next to him, ngabaphathi mali onxiwa nkulu balapha ephondweni. Deputy Director General at the Provincial Treasury, Ms. Nokwanda Tungata. Cakwakhe andiqondi uba bekufanele uba ndiyam-introducer, bekufanele uba nive naqhwaba ndingakathethi nokuthetha uchairperson, ucouncillor Mesuli Ngqondwana, u-district mayor wam phaya o-R Tambo. Ecaleni kwakhe bendibuza uba abantu baseRhawutini nabo bakhona apha, member of the NEC SALGA deployed to the Eastern Cape, but thina simazele Citibank, Councillor Lerato Maloka. And then of course the MEC who just gave us those provocations. I like the part MEC yokuba masingaguqulani kwezi lane sikuzo. Ubu yi-politician, iba yi-politician. If uyi-administrator, iba yi-administrator. But funny enough, in local government, we've been dealing with this concept of the political administrative interface since the inception of local government, and there are still no answers. Sure. In fact, my colleagues at PARI, at the Public Affairs Research Institute, have now started a new project with some metropolitan municipalities to look at this question of the political administrative interface. And I'm sure that work will probably feed into the white paper review that you are doing. But also this aspiration of building an accountable and responsive governance. I want to read you a quote and then I'll tell you which year it is from. There was a policy process that was launched and we were told that that policy process was to assess whether the central objective of our government to serve the people is being advanced by the current provincial and local government arrangements. This decision is in response, or then was in response, to the expectation of all South Africans, like citizens of any other country, to have the right to a more responsive, accountable, efficient, equitable, and affordable government and a better quality of service. Now that policy process was launched on the 31st of July, 2007 by Sidney Mufamadi, then the Minister of Provinces and Local Government. In 2010, we saw another process by the late Sicelo Shicega when he launched the State of Local Government Report, Local Government Turnaround Strategy. Pravin Gordhan came in 2014 with Back to Basics, serving our communities better, and had a clear 6-item agenda in terms of what had to happen. Now, I'm setting that scene and context to say, it's not the first time we're here. There must then be something that we are doing, getting wrong. And we need to, as I said, I love the urgency that I'm picking up in the room, that actually we can't afford to continuously keep launching another turnaround plan, another back to basics, another this. In fact, when I hear a 10-point plan, 9-point plan, because I'm cautious, it's a meaning, we are just doing it out of routine. So I'm going to start and put some people maybe whose voices we haven't heard, maybe now, Councillor Maloka, to say my question, which I would like everybody to answer before I ask you specific individualized questions, is that there's clear acceptance that if local government does not function properly, does not stabilize, and I know that sometimes we look at only coalition governments about stability, which is false. I mean, we've got a by-election in Tabazimbi local municipality next week in Limpopo. One party had 11 of the 12 wards, but they still had 2 mayors, 2 speakers, 2 chief whips. That's a problem of stability, but there's no coalition government there. What are you, in your role or roles, doing to ensure that local government can thrive?
Thanks, Moderator. I think on the concept of professionalization of local government, it rests on striking a good balance between the political will and the administrators to see value in the project of professionalization efforts. But I think it starts somewhere, particularly from the political leg. We need to establish a baseline for councillors to meet before they can join councils. And in the input of the MEC, officials trying to manipulate councillors on issues that really not support the objectives of the municipality. You need a type, the cadre of councillors and both administrators so that we're able to meet these issues that we normally engage on. And also it brings the element on political parties, what role that the political parties play in bringing these councillors to municipalities, what processes can we really just take anyone or anybody to lead these councils, decisions that will be taken at the level of councils, professionals that we're talking about, which is your administrators. There must be a balance in that so that we're able to achieve all these things. The functions and powers of local government. Taking cue from what the Premier was presenting, the issue of HIV and AIDS. Issues of health are not the competence of local government. But the fact that these issues happen in a particular ward, it's a service delivery for government. How do we then, as local government, implementing those unfunded functions that we need to perform? And you could see how the Premier was even saying all mayors must champion issues of HIV and AIDS. So for me, what comes first? Is it about collecting refuse removal, or it's about advocating that people, they must use condom, they must, young kids, they must stay away from sex and all those issues? The priorities, it comes to that, looking at the functions of municipalities. So these unfunded mandates, they must come, the function must follow the budgets for that, as we're indicating that the review of white paper on local government is crucial at this point in time, because the 10%, we can't really achieve our objectives as local government with the minimum, and looking at the high unemployment rate of our communities, there are no opportunities for our people to afford to pay those services.
Thank you so much. Prof. Figeni, you've worked with a number of governments, you've taken certain hats in different state institutions, but you've also had the privilege to traverse the country during the Indrulamiti scenarios, and I see you've moved away from dancing now to birds in terms of your scenarios, and there's no doubt that whether it's Naile Walk or the Hadida that you talk about, local government is an important part of that. What do you see your role in making sure that that sphere of government thrives?
Actually, you're quite correct, because even in the framework of professionalization, we do indicate that you could have the best performing national and provincial government. But if local government, which is closest to where people are, which every day when you open up a tap, water is running, you switch electricity is on, you have to drive through that municipal road, garbage has to be collected. That is where the focus ought to be. Even the input to the current priorities of the 7th administration, the tilt towards mentioning local government was an indication that you could have all other sectors succeeding. If local government fails, the whole edifice of statecraft has failed. But in so doing, though, I listened very carefully from the beginning, Fago, of the presentations. We didn't mention the reality in rural areas of dual authority between traditional leadership and municipalities. Because we go from place to place, there is a contestation over this land, there is a contestation over this, and when you look at the areas most concentrated in terms of poverty, unemployment, it's those areas under these traditional leaderships, they also have municipalities. So if we do not have a clear, intuitive approach on how these are made to work together, we just pretend the other one doesn't exist, the other one, we will spend time. Even land claims in the Eastern Cape are never resolved. One town after the other, they are permanently in the land commission because they say, no, you are expanding to my land, and so forth. But I didn't hear us spending time reflecting on that. So, professionalizing public service, we should just understand the entire ecosystem. But I like what MEC said, just like what the Premier and the President said. Professionalizing public service is also being clear about how you create your public service from the public office bearers. Define their lanes of engagement. But what they didn't mention, we often talked about party-deployed persons. From 2007, the situation had become worse. It was faction-deployed persons, which means even from within the party, the situation was worse. Right now, we're dealing with the DGs. Some of them were fearful that in the GNU, we're going to meet this and that person. They have come back to say, you know what? This situation is better than when you move from one faction to the next one. It's friendlier, more professional. There is no suspicion that this church should be changed because it was bewitched by the person itagatiwe ngumuntu obelapha. Marketing makachinjwe, ngathi bendiyele and so forth. Now we should be doing a serious self-examination. How a party within itself would be so divided that there is no handover whatsoever. One minister said, as I'm leaving this position, I have not been allowed to hand over to the other colleague. It's like a Gestapo was being removed. When there is no handover, the 50 million you spend on certain projects, you have to start afresh because that 10-point plan, that 7-point plan should not even be mentioned. We once had a policy. I was in Uganda last week, they still refer to it, African Renaissance. But when we had our own internal battles within the party, we threw that policy away, leaving the rest of the continent still holding on to the policy because it was internally good, except that it was associated with a particular individual. That's what happens in the municipalities. This person is removed, the next one comes in. But I'll close by saying the biggest challenge is we're focusing on professionalizing a municipal manager, a CFO. We have not spoken about professionalizing our politics as well. Because if to rise into the top of the political chain, it's how disruptive and how crude, how cruel you were in your branches that they take you up to a leadership role. When you reach leadership role, they expect you to suddenly have leadership qualities. When in fact you have refined the skills of a factional leader, the skill of being in the list of every other branch meeting or conference. The skill of rising in South Africa is different from the skill of governing. That's why those who make it at times, when they get into power, They look for any professional to destroy because they can't relate to that professional. Their only mode of existence, anyone who disagrees with me, should be removed. Thank you.
Garfield, basically, tifumene item emnandi namhlanje. So abiza abantu ngo-Garfield. So I hope you will behave so that you don't become my first victim to make an example with publicly. Ndithi yabo ngathi ngu-Garfield low iron and then explain as MEC Williams. Ms. Tungeta, I'm not going to take you into the sphere of politics. I'll leave that to Prof. When you follow the money and you divide the money, sometimes and everybody is knocking and they want more and more and more. But generally, I'm going to come back to that specific question later. But for now, where you are seated, what is it that you can do or can be done to make sure that local government thrives?
Thank you for the question. I think for me, based on what the Honorable MEC has indicated in terms of the fiscal framework, as Treasury, I think we've agreed to support the review of the framework to align with the needs. And also the vertical review of the equitable share. Where we are sitting, we all know that is not going to take, like it's not going to happen tomorrow. It's something that might take time, and we are not so sure whether it will bring any additional money. Even if it were to bring it, it may not be enough still. But what we are advocating is to plead with our leaders to at least practice some financial prudence on what has already been allocated to them. And what we are coming up as Treasury now is only to support, provide support, provide capacity. We have identified 6 game changers, of which we also invite our leaders to adopt. Like we need to make sure that we have funded budgets. If we have adopted unfunded budgets, there must be a clear or a thorough budget funding plan that is being monitored. Not just something that has been presented to council as a paper, it must be monitored. The implementation must be robust. The revenue collection, our leaders have spoken about the collection, making sure that we know our stakeholders, we know our customers, we understand their needs. So if we are serious about that, we need to understand the profile of our communities. So once we do that, we will be able to know which areas are indigent, which areas we can be able to collect revenue. And we talk of the socio-economic factors that are impacting on the revenue collection. But we all know where we are sitting here, that we have an equitable share that is accommodating for indigent customers. And I don't think we are strong in that, in terms of managing that. The thorough and credible reporting. We have introduced M-Score that seeks to unify the recording of information so that we have a credible data that will assist our leadership to make informed decisions. So we need to take, and as a province, we are doing very well, and we are leading, in the whole country. In terms of that, we commend our municipalities for that. Also, another focus is on audit outcomes. We do note, as Premier has indicated, even though this is still within AG, between AG and the municipalities, but we are noting clean audits, and we are very happy about that. But at the same time, we still have disclaimers and advice, simply meaning that those municipalities cannot produce documents to support the expenditure they have incurred. Something that we as leaders cannot be accepting. It has dire effects. Like we were talking of investment. How do you expect customers to pay when you cannot account for what you have spent on? How do you expect investors to come to your municipalities when you cannot account? So, like, we want them to pay emphasis on the audit outcomes. Developing audit intervention plans that are monitored on a quarterly, on a monthly basis. Supply chain management is very, very important, even though it may sound operational, but it has a dire effect on the service delivery. Making sure that we spend our conditional grants, and we commend our municipalities with the introduction of RAS and the stakeholder engagements by our political leaders have really improved the spending on the conditional grant. So we no longer have monies that are returned back, so which is something that is commended. Also, if we do not spend and we can't even get rollovers, it means we must take from our own coffers. That's where then we find ourselves having unauthorized expenditures. And then that must be funded from our own coffers now, monies that we don't have. So that is why we are emphasizing on financial prudence, as we understand and acknowledge the shortages of funds. Then asset management is key, because this is the tool that we use. Infrastructure is the one that we use to deliver services. Our leaders have spoken about making sure that we comply with the 8% that must be set aside to maintain our infrastructure, because if our infrastructure is not maintained, it is going to cost us. So we are pleading with our leaders in terms of that. The last one, what we have discovered when we were assessing our support and the impact, we felt that we need the political leaders' involvement on the day-to-day of running of our municipalities. It's very, very key. And there is a tendency, as officials, we tend to paint a good picture to our political principals. The Bible go to audit outcomes, intervention plans. And I think we need to work closer with them, support them in delivering or in playing their oversight, so that they understand the triggers. They know when the problem is near, without being told by officials, but from the information that is provided to them, they are in a position or capable of understanding these problems on time, instead of just waiting for the audit outcomes for them to know that there is a problem. The governance, making sure that there is the functionality, not only functionality of MPEX, but they must be effective. The DC boards, the internal audit committees and internal control, they must be strategically structured in the municipalities. And we urge our leaders politically, listen to them, because they are the ones that they are watchdogs, actually. They will tell the truth. If they are misled by their officials, internal audit and the committee will tell it as is. So we want them to work closer with them. Okay,
Thank you so much. And I mean, what you're saying is interesting. I've had a situation where political leaders ask officials to go on a visit to actually see the project that is being spoken of, and then officials keep running away and dilly-dallying and not showing up, not putting a date to it. And they want you to talk about it in your speech as a political leader, but they don't want to take you to it to see actually if it is there, this thing that they are talking about. CEO, I mean, SALGA has a unique mandate. It's an interesting creature of our statute and imagination, and part of that is, you are there to advocate for the sphere of local government, promote and protect its interests. But in an environment where the image of local government is not restored, I'm sure that work becomes very difficult, because it talks to a sphere that's losing legitimacy in the eyes of the public. What needs to be done to make sure that this sphere thrives, and particularly in this province?
Faguman Bulele.
Fagu ndim namhlanje.
Oh. No, thank you very much, Program Director. Firstly, I think it's quite important for us to admit that local government is in trouble. Some of that trouble is quite true. We are seen not to be doing what is expected of us to do. There is that reality. But there's also the reality of being unable to do what we are expected to do, because if we were a family, as we are, a local government is known as the poorer cousin. It's quite unfortunate where we have been placed as a sphere of government. Uba besingabantwana, I can say that we have been fed of many things, some of them we don't deserve. Everything is expected of local government, and yet there's very little support that is given to local government. As a sphere, as a fraternity, but particularly, in my view, the municipalities, all 257 municipalities. So, for me, instead of lamenting, I propose that we should take the opportunity that has been afforded to us of reviewing the white paper on local government and not blame anyone, because it's not going to take us anywhere to blame and blame and blame. I think there's an opportunity for us to look at what have we done in the last 30 years as local government. Not only look at what we've done, but also start to aspire to a different future of local government. I think that's the opportunity that this white paper review is giving us. It gives us the opportunity to redefine local government. And if we are to redefine local government, what for me will be, amongst other issues that define local government, is going to be at least two things. One, I think we're going to have to be clear about the type of leadership we want in local government. We're just going to have to be very clear about that. We must cease making the assumption that everybody must just walk into the local government sphere. I think we must be fearful of what is likely to happen in the year 2026 at the next local government elections. We don't have to go far. We just have to look at what happened in the national government elections that were held about a year ago, where everybody, Tom, Dick, Harry, Mary, believe that they're going to solve the problems of the country. We must start to imagine what kind of people are likely to want to contest local government elections with the idea that they're going to solve the problems of 257 municipalities collectively and individually. So if we do not take the opportunity around the review of the white paper and begin to define the type of leadership we demand of local government and put that into some kind of a law, a rule, then we might as well forget about local government. So that's the first thing that I think it's an opportunity that the review is giving us. The second matter that we must deal with immediately is going to be our ability to support and perhaps even define how local government functions. Urhulumende womasipala omncinci norhulumende womasipala ombaxa abafani. So you can't be utilizing the same tool to support two different municipalities and utilize one tool. They demand and require two different things. And we will need to understand this in the context of the fact that when local government was first conceptualized and established with the previous white paper in 1998, And now, 28 years later, things have changed. So we can't blame those that established local government. I think we must first recognize the fact that we are now having to rethink about local government in the context of the fact that there's been at least 28 years of having a local government. So there was no local government. We must move from the premise that there are things that we have managed to achieve in the 30 years of this local government. And there's many, by the way. Local government by March 2026, if I'm not mistaken. So we have been given 15 months to produce a new aspiration. Popularly, that the form